Well, hi, I'm Scott Cuthbert, co-founder of Safeopedia,
And I'm Gabe Encarnacion, president of BBL Safety.
and we're back for another exciting episode of Safeonomics. We had a really interesting conversation today.
Yeah, it's really it's kind of wild because initially, honestly, I had kind of my reservations about this conversation, just because it could lean more of a political discussion, which we've never really had on the show at all. But it actually opened up a few more areas that I didn't anticipate related to change management and how safety professionals can actually become those agents of change and in times where things might look a little bit uncertain.
Yeah, it was. I think Chip Duffie was the guest today, and familiar face to a lot of safety connectors and Safeopedia community members. But if you don't know Chip, definitely interesting background. Uh, Founder and president of EH&S Momentum, and a lot of experience in a lot of different areas and a lot of different facilities. So he shared kind of a thought experiment that he went through recently with a group of EH&S professionals, and yeah, it was really enlightening, and really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the words of encouragement that I would give to our listeners is that come into this with an open mind and ready to have that thought experiment because Chip really does drop a few hints of things that we could maybe do differently as safety professionals. And that starts with how we approach the work, how we approach the profession, and maybe challenging some ways that we've always done things.
Yeah. So with that, let's jump right in. Well, hey, Gabe, back for another exciting episode of Safeonomics.
Ooh, absolutely. And this is going to be a ton of fun because it has, well, actually, we'll just jump right into it because I think that there's potential for this to kind of go sideways and there's potential for it to go really, really well.
Yeah, well, I think it's this year we're focusing on community and how important that is for safety professionals, but also there's some interesting things going on in the world of safety that Chip's got some really interesting perspectives and thoughts on. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you're new to Safeonomics or Safeopedia or Safety Connect, you might not know who Chip Duffie is, but he's a I mean, he's a inaugural exhibitor sponsor of Safety Connect, and I think he's been part of the community since probably pre-day one.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Chip, you want to give everybody a quick intro in case they aren't familiar with you?
Sure. I appreciate you guys having me. I'm Chip Duffie. I'm the president of EH&S Momentum, a recovering corporate lawyer who spent 20 years on the front lines and have been trying to help folks with their health and safety issues ever since.
That's my favorite description of your career is that you're a recovering attorney. That's like I was really hoping that you would say that because it's the best. So, I mean, we're looking at kind of the effect of regulatory changes in safety. And for the folks that might be, our massive international audience, obviously in the United States, we just went through an election year and there's been a lot of changes that are already hitting. So regardless of what side of the aisle you're on or how your political leanings are or any of that sort, one way or another, we are dealing with change that's happening right now. And regulatory change is one of those things that it's going to affect businesses, and whatever is going to affect business will affect safety professionals that are in there. So, Chip, why don't you just start off just telling us, from your perspective, what have you seen affecting the safety profession overall from a regulatory and regulatory standpoint?
So more than anything, I think what we're seeing is just like a volume of noise and concern because the current administration has made it clear that there will be no new regs. I help several companies with some Superfund sites. EPA stopped all communications. Those have since resumed, but an absolute shift in the mindset of the agency. And what happens is now we can all get news and, real-time updates and tweets. And, we see things like a congressman introduces a bill to eliminate OSHA. And so as environmental health and safety professionals, well, I mean, OSHA does at least give us a framework around which to work. So the idea that that was actually going to ever come to be didn't matter. The idea that that person from Arizona really wanted was it to be a state thing, not a federal thing. That's what we're up against. We're up against people having kind of making their own crisis, if you will, and taking sound bites and things that aren't actionable and making themselves concerned about it. And so what I've done very recently, I spoke at a group called Infinite, which is the Industrial Liquid Recycling Association, with 50 EH&S professionals. And we walked through some of the scenarios and talked about what could a new administration really do and what they couldn't do and how it would affect us as professionals. And it was just a fascinating conversation that we had.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, that
I don't mean to freeze you, sorry.
yeah, no, sorry. I was just maybe for benefit of framing the conversation today, like you gave a kind of a similar presentation or a thought experiment, I guess, back in 2017,
Hmm.
right? So looking back, what were those big regulatory shifts that you accurately predicted? And what maybe surprised you? Do you recall?
I do. It was the same group. They had a different branding then. They were the National Oil Recyclers Association then. But in 2017, it was different. Trump was coming in. You had to believe. You had to listen to the words he said, and he said some of the same things. We're going to slash. We're going to slash regulation. We're going to make it easier to do business, which many safety professionals mean kind of maybe they take. Execs will take the foot off the gas. And so what I warned against was this thing called IEE, this irrational executive exuberance. Like just because there are no rules doesn't mean, just because there's no new rules, excuse me, there doesn't mean there's no rules. And I believe that an entrenched agency staff that my whole career had been the same professionals, regardless of who was the boss, I thought they would dig in and outlive whoever was the president. And I also think that there are significant external forces on us in the marketplace, and frankly, being profitable, that don't let you do anything other than drive health and safety excellence. So I sort of predicted that it was going to be sort of more bark than bite. But it was a very chaotic time. It was I think when you compare the two presidencies, his two terms now, one seems a lot more methodical than the first. And so that was sort of what I kind of warned against. I said, don't let your executives go. This isn't just going to be a free for all. Like there are still rules by which we must play, not the least of which it's just bad business to not take care of your employees or not follow the environmental regulations. And so that was kind of my main takeaway.
Well, I think you gave me an example a while back that, let's say, if regulations related to, let's say, car manufacturing, or even traffic or things like that, if someone were to all of a sudden say, well, we're changing the rules, or a lot of these standards are going to go away or change, it doesn't mean that there's just this vacuum that occurs. People will still be in vehicles, they will still be driving, there are still rules of the road that, regardless of who's making the rules, they do actually work. That doesn't mean that they're perfect, but it doesn't mean that they're all bad either, and that they should just be gone. So I liked your perspective too of being able to cut through the noise, because there is a lot. We get inundated with so much information, and even just sifting through what is actionable is a challenge. So how do you even do that as a safety professional when you have all these sources coming at you, and sift through it so that you can actually do something?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with focusing on the core of what your business does. because you as an environmental health and safety professional, our whole industry, you know, we have a bad stereotype that I believe we've outlived, but it was earned, and that was the pocket protector, you know, safety cop guy that wasn't trying to drive the business, but the most effective environmental health and safety leaders and programs that I am familiar with are integrated in the business and are trying to drive productivity and profitability and morale and all these things that help the business move forward. So when you focus on what you do as at the core, and then try and drill down on what is changing around that, that is the way to think about it. Not in this abstract that, oh, OSHA might go away, but in how what does that actually mean for my people, and how can I coach my leadership team if we start heading down a road that I don't like? You know, the easiest example is you think about consumables and PPE and things that are cost money. Like, you're not going to just stop spending that money because OSHA says, because OSHA is not going to enforce. I think there's a misnomer that they would. I think what we will see more than anything is just less enforcement. Frankly, less people to do less enforcement. But that doesn't mean if you cross the line or you break the law as it's written now that they wouldn't come down heavy on you. I mean, no one has said that. Not one Trump appointee has said that. It is still the law of the land. It is still the good way to do business. And providing that PPE is going to be necessary because you've taken a look at the business and the operations, and those cut resistant gloves actually help your guys stay on the job longer. So it's the idea that so my advice would be to look at what you actually do, step back, try to find out if anything around that is changing. And if it is, prepare your management for that change in a way that doesn't cause any backsliding.
I like that concept of focusing on what is the problem you're trying to fix first, and how are you already doing things?
Yeah. Yeah, and it maybe kind of ties in with kind of that point about safety professionals could either gain some power and influence, you know, or you know, become expendable, right? And so obviously we're saying that's not necessarily the case. So what are those key factors for determining which way you go kind of in your career with your organization?
I mean, you know, it starts with what you believe and what you want to do. Like in a perfect world, as EHS professionals, we're so good at our job that we make ourselves expendable. Like there doesn't need to be someone overseeing them and all, but that doesn't mean that. And when I say expendable in the true safety oversight role, you know, I mean the idea that I always have to explain this to CEOs. Sometimes it says, look, operations own safety, but EHS teams, safety departments, they support it. So if your operations team runs flawlessly and is committed and knows that it is the best way to be more productive and more profitable, then there is less of a role for that safety professional to play in the historic sense. However, when I said where you got to believe is you have to believe that you can add even more value. You know, you're now integrated with operations. You're now providing them with real data. You're now giving them visibility into the program success. You're marketing your success to your insurance company, to your customer base. You know, you're more than a paper pusher. You're adding true value. And I think in a lot of ways, that's a choice that people don't make. And you can, you know, look, it's coming from a guy with a lot of gray hair. I mean, you got to reinvent. You got to try. You can't just fall back on kind of the way it always was, or this fear of OSHA. If that was your mindset, if that's the way you drove behavior, because at this point, OSHA hardly comes. They don't do very many just blind knock at the doors. I mean, they respond when called or when responding to a fatality or a major incident. So I think you have to make a choice that you want to contribute with your lens and your skill set. And some people are probably going to be incapable of making that choice.
Well, I think about that in the context of what happened during COVID. And I remember seeing quite a few safety professionals that either had moved to different roles in their company or were out completely. And it seemed to cut both ways. It depended on how the organization viewed the role of the safety professional. And then as you said, it depended on how this professional conducted their work. If you were just, as you mentioned, walking around with your clipboard, which I actually hesitate to mention because it seems to get a rise out of like quote
No,
unquote
it's so
real safety
cliche
people.
and
I know, right?
outdated.
Yeah. So you walk around with a
Nobody's doing
clipboard.
that.
Yeah, if you're just checking off boxes, there's pretty much something that's already taken your job. That's just the long and short of it. But that's where the human element comes into play, right? If you're the safety professional that can actually go there and enact change because you are connecting with the folks that are in the organization, actually driving something positive that comes out of it, I think that's actually the best way to go, regardless of how regulations change.
I think that's a great way to look at it, Gabe. I had the good fortune of working for a CEO that was the best change manager I've ever been a part of,
Hmm.
and he drove a lot of change into the business. And the way he would describe it, and this is the way I describe AI to other safety professionals. You know, this is another like existential threat to a lot of jobs, not just EHS jobs, but it is a wave. And there are going to be people that surf it, and there are going to be people that get overwhelmed by it.
Hmm.
And I'm a surfer. I'm going to try. I mean, I may crash and burn, but I'm not going to be caught. I am seeing the world change, and I am going to try to pivot and change with it. And I think the great thing about our profession and the environmental health and safety people is we reinvent ourselves all the time. We're always adapting and trying and helping and coaching and supporting. I mean, that is by our very nature who we are and what we do. And so that I think naturally we're surfers. And I think whatever folks that kind of can't get past that, or maybe they're at a point in their career where they don't feel like another run at surfing. I think between regulatory change and all the AI tools that are available, and it used to be a thing. Like I used to get paid to write policies for people, and then all of a sudden people quit asking for that because they could just literally go write their own. And it's these changes are occurring, and people don't. I think people that don't kind of see it as an opportunity are going to kind of convince themselves that it's bad. And I think that's kind of at the core of change management anyway.
I agree with that.
And that's a good a good place maybe to talk about the value and importance of having a community of when you're maybe feeling that way, or you're not sure how to iterate or take that next step. The leaning on your peers is a good way to do it. So you talked a little bit at the beginning about this session you did recently where you're presenting, but it's really more of a let's open up a dialogue and have a conversation. And I know there were some interesting takeaways that you had from that. So maybe could you share, what that community looked like when you guys came together and had this conversation about OSHA?
Sure. So I'll share a couple of things about it. So one of the things I did is I framed the discussion as a massive, this is a new change. Instead of more regulation, there's less enforcement, pro-business, all of the things. And how does that impact, the EHS profession? And is it even true in our world? And the way I framed it was, if there's this fervor that we're over-regulated, what I'd like you to do, and there's probably 50 people in the room, I'd like you to tell me what one thing you would change. You're now a special envoy to the White House. They've given you a magic wand. What would you change? You know, and I looked at these folks who I know are overworked and have cussed the the burden and the paperwork and the recordability and the OSHA log and the hazardous waste manifest and all these things, and literally not one person had anything to say. Now, it was you know, people are not comfortable, you know, speaking up, and there was all of that, and I did have a few people come up to me afterwards like, I wish I'd said this, but I even went so far as to say, let's talk about the OSHA log, like the old standby. Like I've never known a time without it. And, you know, I've been around since rocks were soft. So it's like, what if we didn't have it? Is that a good thing? And it triggered some very interesting conversation. And I think the general consensus was that it was a pretty good equalizer. Recordability is a hot mess. And the fact you can just get a prescription drug of Advil, you know, prescription strength Advil, put you on the OSHA log, super frustrating to people. That didn't change. But the overall concept that there was a scorecard that every business had to follow, that was most, I mean, unless I would say everyone, but most of the people in that room thought that was a good thing. And so I was really interested in that because that is the classic paperwork tracker. Now, if I had a magic wand, I would change what is recordable because that's a very frustrating exercise that all of us have to go through. And especially when you're being measured by your recordables by third parties. So you're trying to do work for a big refinery and they have a third party in between you, you know, one of the clearing houses that says, oh, these guys had 2 recordables. And you have to go in and explain that it wasn't 2 recordables. One was you know, we had an unfriendly doctor, or, you know, we had failed to give the doctor our lost work date. I mean, our light work policy, that kind of thing. But it was so interesting that no one else could really come up with anything. I mean, a few things popped up. Tort reform, an insurance person brought up that, which of course was outside the scope. And I don't disagree at all that we could probably benefit from that. But we also talked about the hazardous waste manifest, you know, the cornerstone of RCRA, of managing waste. And I think to a person in there, everyone believed it was until we have a better way, it is the only thing that keeps people competitive, because otherwise somebody, you know, all of a sudden, if you don't have a hazardous waste manifest tracking it, then anybody with the pickup trucks in the hazardous waste business, and that can just end up on the side of the road like it used to before we had the manifest system. So it was super interesting to me that I think people came in with a default that we're hyper regulated, but when given the chance to change one thing, they didn't. I mean, you know, I'm sorry, I'll keep going on, but one of the things that came up that people generally seem to think was a good idea was like putting a pause on the new heat stress rules, on the new, you know, and in concept, I get it. That's a bad idea. We need to protect people from working in hot environments. But you know, the trigger was at 80 degrees, and I live in Dallas, Texas. It's 80 degrees most of the time. So it's like you're changing business, and I think a lot of people feel like that's not the federal government's role. And so that one pause is that had already occurred. Seems like most of the folks in the room were supportive of that. Although every one of them has a program, every one of them is going to do what they can to keep their employees rested and hydrated. But this idea that OSHA could walk in and ding you because it's 82 degrees and your guys haven't documented that they've done what they're supposed to. I think that is seen more as a relief on the environmental health and safety personnel that I was talking to, more than it is a terrible thing that the government's stripping this away. And at the core is because their company's going to do the right thing for the most part anyway.
I
I
think
was
that's
gonna, sorry, just
yeah.
to
Go ahead, Scott.
just to sorry, Gabe, just to close the loop on that though, from the community aspect, so obviously you're talking about some specific items, but if you said, wave that magic wand, what would you change? And you opened up that dialogue, did you get a sense of maybe how it kind of changed people's thought process?
Hmm.
By the end of that conversation, when, it's easy to have your grievances, but when given the opportunity to go through that thought experiment, what was your sense of mindset of the people walking away from that conversation?
I think they really appreciated the exercise. They had not thought about it. And the where you talk where the word community just leaps to mind because many of these folks are solos.
Hmm.
They're a one-man team, a couple person team, and you just don't get that kind of feedback. And they I don't know what they if they're a part of a Safeopedia type community or not, but like that is absolutely a new secret weapon that we've got. And it's the online has just made it so easy to support each other and bounce ideas and find out that you're not alone. And that and that people were sitting there thinking, I don't know what I'm going to tell my management. But when you hear other people having the same problems and the same thoughts, it definitely opened their mind. And it took them a while. We had a roundtable after several other presenters, and it people had really opened up,
Hmm.
and they were trying to share their problems, and share what they saw as kind of their biggest challenges that they were facing. And these are things that they just would have taken with them otherwise. So that
Hmm.
that the value of community is so underestimated, I think. And people can see it as either a waste of time or a commitment to join something. And then, but if you know how to leverage it and you know how to get value out of it, it's worth its weight in gold.
Well, I think that's where a lot of this is leading as well. At the start of the conversation, we were talking about cutting through all this noise. And so even having a network of people that you trust that are also in the same boat, maybe they're dealing with the same kind of issues that you're dealing with. Some of them may have even have found a solution, something that worked for them. And so you can immediately listen to those folks a lot more easily because they're a trusted source. Once you've built that connection within a community of safety professionals, you can actually start to take those actionable items because someone else has either done it or is willing to go through it with you to have that conversation. I think on top of that too, it's not just for fellow safety pros. Now, if you get used to building that community, now you get to involve other people, let's say within your organization or that are in other roles that would actually enhance the work that you're doing as a safety pro.
Yeah, I tell you, it's so much more valuable to do it in person and to have or an active community than just following along or like some of the larger like say Facebook groups, like you could literally just say that the sky is blue and somebody's going to snark you and like there's a lot of trolls and venom out there that is super corrosive to what to what you're just talking about. But other than that, like involving yourself and you're not walking alone.
Mm.
There's other folks that want to, and that's the great thing about what I've found and why I love being an EHS professional is that they're servants they have the heart of a helper, heart of a servant out is the default. Most people want to help you, and I think certainly for younger safety professionals, that's an important thing to hear.
Mm.
That there's tons of value and wisdom out there that is just available to you.
Well, I think
Yeah.
even a comment that you had made earlier of just that a lot of these folks are one and two person shops in what they're trying to do or one or two person departments. And I think a dark side to that kind of servant mentality, if that's a right way to put it, is that you can tend to want to take everything on yourself. And you don't necessarily have to. You probably shouldn't either. But that's where the community comes into play. where you can throw out a question to a trusted group or connect with trusted people, and they would actually be able to help you. You don't have to go through all this stuff by yourself.
Yeah, I agree. We got caught up a lot on the federal side because that's the big change. But where
Right.
it hasn't changed, and this was another question I posed, is at the state level. And so, like I mentioned, that congressman in Arizona that sought to delete OSHA or whatever, however you want to phrase it. Um, uh, it wasn't just stop having safety rules. It was put it on the states because it shouldn't be a
Hmm.
federal thing. It should be a state thing. And so one thing that was super interesting was how bad an idea everyone in that room thought it was, because they could only imagine, there's some pretty big companies in there with operations in 30, 40 states. I mean, can you imagine? Like you've got you suddenly don't have a baseline. You don't have a common ground upon which we all generally agree. And then certain states may take it deeper. California is sort of infamous for being more regulated than other places. But at the base level, there's a standard. And I think without that standard, businesses would really struggle to stay up to speed, to stay in compliance. You got guys driving across the border in towns that are close. Like it feels like a administrative nightmare to me. But that was another thing that the role of the states. No one's saying that's going to change. And so, one of the folks brought up the idea that there is not his state was incapable of taking this on. Like they didn't have the infrastructure, they don't have the people, they don't even have a building for it. It's federal OSHA that's running their state, and they can't do. He doesn't think the state could do it at all. So it's a lot of this and a lot of these issues, a lot of with what the Department of Government Efficiency is doing, like the change is great, but have we thought through what's the next step? Like once there's change or once something's been slashed, what grows in its place? What gets focused on? I don't know how much thought is going into that right now, but I'm hopeful that it can be positive. But it's that kind of, I'm sort of meandering all over the place, but it's that sort of like it's great, delete OSHA, but then what? Okay, what do we really expect these states to just be ready on day one?
Yeah,
Like
somebody's got to
I
fill
don't
that vacuum.
I don't know how much thoughtfulness. I just hope more thoughtfulness than I am perceiving is going into a lot of these massive decisions.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on that note, and maybe it's more of the same, but if if it's at the state level or even at the company level, and you kind of touched on this already, like um, if the companies had to self-regulate their EHS programs with or without the federal oversight, what best practices would you be recommending, to prevent that race to the bottom? Did that come up in this conversation?
A little bit, and the way it came up is that there's some external forces outside of the government that are driving a lot of the behavior. Now, at its core, it might be because the government rules exist, but we have these massive clearinghouses like Avetta and ISNet World that require you to hit certain levels before you can do work. So there's a massive infrastructure that's already built, sort of forcing companies to do right, and that flows all down through the supply chain. Um, Obviously, there's legal ramifications, and I hope generally companies believe that a race to the bottom, while short term may be more profitable, and maybe that's all a company can look at right now, but long term, it is not good practice to not handle your dangerous materials properly, to make your employees unsafe, to have injuries, to get a bad reputation. It just takes one Facebook post now for a company to have to hire a crisis manager to deal with. the headline, your company hit a school bus, kind of thing, like it's that there's a lot of external forces on folks. There's also a lot of private enforcement, particularly on the environmental side. I had a picture of a drone, and they're now air monitor mounted drones that a plaintiff's group can use, or even a citizens group could use to monitor your air emissions. So if you think, oh, we're not regulated, and now you're gonna turn up the valve on your stack and exceed your permitted emissions, I think there's a lot of forces at play that'll hold you back on that. And I think the market won't allow it. I don't think business will allow it. I don't think that means the government should go away entirely, but I do think that there's a backstop there of doing good business and being profitable and productive is just counter to backsliding or racing to the bottom, like you said, Scott.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said about the just sorting through all of that change that could be happening, and then understanding what would happen after that thing that's proposed. So whether a regulatory body exists or not, whether it is given more enforcement or less enforcement ability, that kind of thing. As you said, there's a lot of forces at play. And so probably one of the things that has to happen is that people need to understand to think through these things a little bit more before reacting immediately. Don't just jump on that soundbite that you heard in that group, or that someone who's not even related to that industry has talked about with you. But really start doing some research. Start to understand, how is it going to affect the way that you do your work? How does it affect your organization? And then bounce it off other people that are good, good resources, and who also understand what's happening.
That saying that about good resources made me think, one of the things that people underutilize, at least I find in a lot of our clients that we see, they've underutilized the resources available to them from their insurance carrier. I think it's a misnomer for people to believe that insurance carriers want you to be a train wreck or want you to have high premiums. I think they put a lot of time and effort into trying to make you more insurable. And there's a lot of free resources that are available. And so, especially if you're a younger EH&S professional that is just getting involved, the ability to start a narrative with your insurance company, or the ability to frame your company's progress and program in a way to them that with their risk advisory services can make sense, will help you drive your premiums down. I mean, I have seen it time and time again. We help people get their insurance lower, but the only way to do that is to actually be able to tell a story and demonstrate to those resources and take advantage of the things that are there. So, I mean, there's community, and there's the other resources that are available. And then, the idea of do your research, that can kind of seem daunting to people. That may be overwhelming, because where do you start? But drilling in on whatever trade association or like-minded, I mean, finding folks that are in the same business, finding folks that are in the same industry, and participating in those trade associations. I mean, this was an environmental health and safety forum specifically for industrial liquid recycling. I mean, unless you knew you were looking for it, it's not something that they're not on the headlines of
It's pretty
of USA
specific.
Today. But there's 50 people there. We all learned something, and we all benefited, and we all contributed. And the idea, the lone wolf is a choice. You may be the only person in your company, and you may feel disrespected because, man, have I seen that. And the environmental health and safety professional is an unsung hero all the time. But that being a lone wolf about it, and not trying to partner with folks or find like-minded folks, that to me, that feels like a choice.
Yeah, well, that's a great a great point, and I think a great maybe point to end on of just obviously interesting thought experiment going on right now, and lots of change underway, but definitely choosing to be part of the pack and not the lone wolf is probably the best route to take, certainly in these uncertain times, more so than any other.
One thing I'll just leave you with this thought about an EHS professional has an opportunity now because of this change. If you want to serve, you control the narrative. Your company is going to look to you to be the expert on these things, and they're going to be reading the sound bites, and your executives are going to get their Twitter feed or whatever echo chamber they're in is going to be telling them what they're hearing. It is an opportunity for you to grab the narrative and coordinate with operations and drive improvement. And you do that with data. You do that with understanding and empathy and working with operations. But there is not. I think it's a great time to be an EHS professional, regardless of what any changes or what anyone thinks. We're a valued resource. And I just think you gotta develop a narrative so you can be looked at as the leader in your company, because that they're going to look to you. And if you don't have an answer, you put your hands up, they're going to look somewhere else. So I think it's a great opportunity for folks to help drive value in their business.
I agree with that. I think that's, we talk about change management, and instead of being tossed around by the changes, as you said, safety professionals have an opportunity to actually be the ones driving some of that change, or at least being an anchor and someone that people can rely on to actually provide good information and do something that is actually beneficial and good.
Well, guys, I've had a great time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Us too. It was great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chip. Really appreciate your insights and joining us this afternoon, and look forward to seeing you at some of the Safeopedia community events.
Oh, I'll be there. I'll be there. I appreciate it. Y'all take it easy.
All right. Thanks, Chip.
Thanks.